Hi guys, this is Caitlin Prindle. In the book, The Collaborative Teacher, Working Together as a Professional Learning Community, I did Chapter 7, Teaching in the Dark, written by Lily G. Jesse. The first quote we see in the chapter is from Maisha Taylor, a first grade teacher at Vaughn Elementary, and the whole chapter goes back to referencing her school. And her quote is, "I could never go back to teaching without the use of data. Teaching without data would be like getting dressed in the dark." That quote will be referenced later on in this presentation. The chapter goes over developmental stages experienced when a staff learns it has to share data. Those 7 stages that the staff goes through to go to buy-in to use the data. Stage 1 is shock. Stage 2 is professional resistance. Stage 3 is fear. Stage 4 is reluctant compliance. Stage 5 is discovery. Stage 6 is bargaining. Stage 7 is advocacy. Stage 1, shock. The first quote we see when we go to that chapter is, "You have got to be kidding." Accountability is not discussed in the initial interview. First-year teachers are always thought to be accountable for their teaching, but after they sign on the dotted line, they realize that they have to be accountable for learning instead of just teaching. Robert Marzano said, "A curriculum must first be viable before you can guarantee implementation." That is, it has to be manageable. When I was first hired on at Grant County, I was hired on as a science elective teacher, and I wasn't given a curriculum. As a first-year teacher, not having a curriculum wasn't manageable. But when I switched to 6th grade science, I was given a curriculum and I understood exactly what I needed to be teaching the children. Stage 2, professional resistance. The first quote we see is, "I don't have time for testing. I've got to teach." Well, your principals are going to ask you, teach what? What exactly are you teaching? A lot of times teachers teach to the test, but those tests could lack content validity or reliability or both. Teachers need to determine the power standards that each unit is asking students to learn. Steve Edwards said, "One test is too much if it is not used to guide instruction." Stage 3 is fear. The first quote we see is, "Will my data be used against me?" Sharing of data as a first-year teacher is scary. You think that that data is going to determine whether or not you're back next year. But the sharing of data in a PLC is actually used to foster interdependence to obtain reteaching help. Interdependence as defined by a PLC does not mean teachers should carry the load for the ineffective practices of a colleague. Next to stage 4, reluctant compliance. The first thing we see is, "You can make me collect data, but you can't make me use it." We collect data, but then we either don't have the time to implement what we learn from the data, or we don't even use it. That is called the pretty paper stage. You are giving the principals what they want, and you're just trying to get the stuff off your plate. Stalling at this stage is actually due to overload. Teachers feel like there's too much stuff that they're doing, and the staff and principals are too tired to listen. The records that you see during this stage need to be precise and accurate. They should follow the steps of norm setting in your PLC, collective responsibility, and a level of trust. Stage 5 is discovery. The first quote we see is, "My kids are learning more than I thought. I can spend my time teaching other things." This is when data becomes your friend. You can use the data to reteach what skills students actually need to know, or you can use the data to teach new skills that students don't already know. Stage 6 is bargaining. Some things in this for me after all. I'm willing to teach the skill area for our entire grade level since my kids performed well, if you would be willing to work with my students during that period of time. So one teacher's students are lacking in an area and another teacher's students are higher in that area, so the higher teacher would go help the other students bring their knowledge up. And this is the stage where we go from me to we, and from my kids to our kids. Stage 7, advocacy. I can't live without data. Teaching without data is like dressing in the dark. That was the very first quote we saw at the beginning of the chapter. Students deserve second chances. Second chances supported with new approaches that will make them successful. Stage 7 really references going back to sports and using that as a analogy. Football players don't have just one chance to get the 10 yards they need. They get 4 chances to get 10 yards. And having different data in your playbook is the only way that goal can be achieved. That's the only way your students can be successful. They need those second chances. Now, there are some steps from moving to shock to advocacy. Reality checks. You have to really understand that the data that you're seeing is not going to be used to fire you, and if you're struggling, you're allowed to ask for help. Acceptance and support from colleagues. You need to be accountable for teaching. It moves from being accountable for teaching to accountable for learning. Scheduling. We always make time to do our lessons, but we actually need to make time for data analysis, and it needs to be where we can use the data to change our teaching. It can't be give the test, look at the data a week later, well, it's too late, we can't go back and change our teaching. Dispersed leadership. During a PLC, each person should be part of something in the meeting, responsible for something. They suggest using someone as a data lead for each grade level, someone who is in charge of making sure the peace is kept, so a peacekeeper or a climate watcher. The next one is student efficacy. Include your students in the data sharing. Make it a competition. I know that during fundraisers in school, like penny drives or shoe drives, they make it a competition to see what class can raise the most pennies or bring in the most shoes. But if you make it a competition on their test, the students have more buy-in. The next one is teacher confidence in the assessment. That goes back to the test being reliable and valid. If you're just teaching to the test, you don't actually know what you're supposed to be teaching. So you need to look at the assessment to make sure that you have that confidence in the assessment. Deprivation of practices. Shared data meetings should answer the 4 critical questions of a PLC. Are the children learning? How do you know? What are your plans for those not learning? And what are your plans for those who have mastered the essential questions? And Sam will go over that more in the next presentation. And the last one is celebration of success. The quote that I found very funny in the chapter was, toot your own horn or it will remain in a state of untootedness. It just means that if you don't praise your success, you're not going to feel that level of accomplishment. And the last quote that I found in the chapter was, without celebrations, every day of the week becomes an endless Wednesday. That is by Dufour and Eaker. Wednesdays are awful, and without having that celebration to look forward to, your week and your year will become dreaded. Thank you for listening.